Hey everyone, I've got a short video for you today on a subject that I get asked about a lot, and that is how to connect the Weldpro SB8 spool gun with the Weldpro Omni 210. It's a fairly simple and straightforward procedure, but there's nothing in the manual on how to do it, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that today. So let's get started. So first things first, go ahead and power on your machine. Once you're powered on, make sure you're in MIG mode. You're always going to be spool gun welding in MIG mode. If you've got your standard MIG gun currently plugged in the machine, go ahead and unplug that. Swinging up the panel, loosening the set screw inside, and then removing your MIG gun from the connector at the machine. In order to plug in the spool gun, you're going to plug it in just like the standard MIG gun. Quick tip, a little WD-40 or 3-in-1 oil or some other lubricant on these O-rings on this rear connector are going to, number one, make the O-rings last a lot longer because they're not going to get chewed up. Number two, it's going to make the pin slide right in and out very easily, and you won't have any possible issues with not having the pin in all the way or something like that. So go ahead and lubricate those O-rings. Slide the pin in the front all the way. Tighten down your set screw. Usually tighten until I feel it grab, and then I'll wiggle it a little bit. Make sure it's fully tightened, and you're good to go. Next, you're going to want to connect your 4-pin remote connection to your MIG remote connector, and then tighten down that nut just snug. And then, as always, with your MIG connection, your ground clamp is going to be in the negative. On this machine, always connect your ground clamp negative. There's a little symbol down there with the little ground clamp eating a piece of metal. That shows you always connect your ground clamp there. Polarity is changed in the menu, so if you need to run electrode negative for flux core or electrode positive for solid wire, you just change it in the menu. Now I'm going to run around to the other side and push a few buttons and show you how to get the spool gun set up for feeding on the Omni. So I'll meet you over there. Okay, so here we are looking at the front of the machine. We've got our spool gun connected properly. We've got our ground clamp in the negative, and we're going to go through the menu to get this spool gun set up and feeding and welding some aluminum. All right, so like I said before, we're going to be in MIG mode for this. We're going to be using the menu button here for pretty much everything. So first thing we want to do is go ahead and hold that menu button down for about 3 seconds to go into the parameter selections. You'll see it comes up user menu. The first thing that you'll see is it scrolls process across the front. So it's not so much a stick, TIG, MIG process selection as it is a selection of which gas you're using, or if you're using flux core or the aluminum spool gun. So you'll see that the first selection is C25, which is 25% carbon dioxide, 75% argon gas. The second selection is 100% carbon dioxide. Third selection is gasless flux core. Fourth selection is just aluminum. So we're going to want to select the aluminum. And what that does when we select aluminum is it does two things. So number one, it sets our polarity to electrode positive, same polarity we use for any steel solid core wire. And then number two, it sets our feeding to the spool gun instead of inside the box. So anytime you're using the spool gun, you're going to want to choose the aluminum selection in the menu. If you were to run, say, a 5356 wire from inside the box through the standard gun with a Teflon liner, you would want to choose C25 or C100 because that would send your feeding power to the unit instead of the spool gun. So let's go back into that menu again. So notice what it did here. If I don't make a selection in that menu for a few seconds, it automatically exits the menu and goes back to the standard view of voltage and wire feed speed. And this will happen if you're not either turning the dial or hitting the menu button to make a selection, like I said, for a couple of seconds. So it'll probably happen to us a couple of times as I explain these things in the menu. So let's go ahead and hold that down again. Back into the user menu. Okay, we've got aluminum. You know, notice something I wanted to show you here as well. So you can hear, so aluminum, maybe you can hear this, maybe you can't. If I turn it to flux core, back to C100, and let's see if we can do it again. C100, flux core, hear that? If you can hear that, that's your polarity changing inside the machine. So from aluminum, that's positive, electrode negative, back to electrode positive, electrode negative, electrode positive. So that's why you always keep your ground clamp in the negative. You don't ever have to switch it around. So anyway, in order to make that selection, we're just going to go ahead and hit the menu button, make the selection. So then we move next to our wire diameter. As you can see, by trying to select other sizes, there are no other sizes to select. I personally prefer 030 wire in the spool gun, which means that I've got to adjust the wire feed speed some in order to get it dialed into where I want it. You'll probably find the same. Again, we're going to go back into that menu. All right, 035. We're going to go ahead and choose 1/8 inch material. You'll see that on 230 volt power, you've got choices from 18 gauge through 3/16 of an inch thick material. On 120 volt power, you're going to have less choices because output is limited to 120 amps. Let's go ahead and choose 1/8 inch material. Hit that menu button. Inductance. So if you haven't already watched our video on inductance, go ahead and do that, or you can read about what it does, or I may make another video later that explains it in a little bit more detail. Also, you could call me and ask me, but we're not going to explain it here. We're just going to set it at +5. The machine goes all the way from -10 to +10. We'll set it at +5. Wire feed speed, this is just the units that are going to be displayed. So you're looking at inches per minute or meters per minute. I like inches per minute. And this just asks you if you want to reset factory defaults. We don't need to do that, so we're going to leave it at no. Now, once you've selected all these, it automatically saves what you choose. You don't have to do anything from here. You can either wait and let it exit out of the menu, or when you get to the end where it asks you reset factory defaults and you choose no, go ahead and hold that menu button down again for 3 seconds, and then it will exit out that way as well. As you can see, the machine's given us a voltage of 16.3 volts, a wire feed speed of 370 inches per minute, and we can turn that up or down to our liking. And if you've used the MIG function before, you'll know that when you turn the dial, that the wire feed speed and the voltage synergically adjust. They adjust together. You can change that a little bit by hitting the menu really quick. Don't hold it down, just hit it quick, and you'll see that voltage starts blinking. Then you can adjust the balance of your voltage for a given wire feed speed. So you can choose your wire feed speed and then choose your voltage. As you can see, we've got a range at 456 inches a minute from 20.3 volts all the way down to 15.1. For any wire feed speed, you're going to find about 5 volts of range to choose from. That's going to be plenty of adjustment to either go way too cold like this weld, or probably too hot like this one, at least for aluminum anyway. I mean, that'd be a good number for steel. Aluminum is a little different. So we're just going to go somewhere in the middle here. It doesn't really matter. We're not doing any welding today. I just wanted to show you how to set this up. Okay, lastly here, I want to go over proper spool gun setup real quickly as far as the actual setting up of the spool gun itself. I believe we have another video with this, but I just wanted to go back over this because I get a lot of people asking me about it. So a couple of key things here. So I usually tell people it's all about tension, 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 tension. So tension on the spool, tension on the drive roller, tension on the cover. All very important that you don't over tension these, otherwise you can basically choke this spool gun motor to a halt. So once you've got your spool of wire fed through, and what I find the easiest way to do that is just go ahead and back off the tensioning nut until everything's loose. Gently feed it in here, kind of squeeze it down a little bit, run the trigger so that way this grabs and feeds it into the liner, goes ahead and feeds it through. And the next thing that you're going to want to do is go ahead and use the nut with the spring to tension down your wire spool. What I've found on pretty much all these spool guns is that you can just tension this down pretty much all the way. It doesn't put that much pressure or tension on the spool when you've got it just snugged up like that, right? What you want is you want this spool to not freewheel inside of there and cause it to bird's nest, but you also don't want it to be so tight that it doesn't spin. Next thing you want to do is set your tension on your drive roller. So what you can see right now, I've got it loosened all the way up. When I hit the trigger, it doesn't grab, it doesn't pull anything through. As I tighten this down, there you go, it's starting to grab here. I'll probably give it maybe another half a turn. It should feed smoothly. If it's feeding slowly or poorly, it's too tight. If it's slipping, it's too loose. I prefer slightly too loose to slightly too tight because you can, run a tack or two and see that if it's slipping a little bit, just add a little bit of tension. I don't encourage over tensioning of either the spool or especially the drive motor. So lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put our cover on. Make sure everything snaps into place properly. Now, this nut here tightens down on the same shaft that wire spool is on. So if you tighten this down too tight, it'll start to turn that nut underneath that's holding the spool down and over tension everything. So just snug it up and you'll be fine. Lastly, go ahead and put your contact tip on. I've got 030 wire in here. I'm using an 030 tip. There will be people out there that tell you that for aluminum you have to use one size larger tip. I've always run the exact same size and just been mindful of my tension, and I've always had good luck. I've never had any feeding issues. I don't like to run a large size tip because it can cause wandering inside and cause your arc to wander. Lastly, go ahead and put your nozzle on, cut it back, and you're ready to weld. All right, lastly, now that we're set up and ready to weld, just a couple of quick tips that I've found useful in my welding. Number one, when you are using the MIG welding process for aluminum, you're going to be running a longer stick out than you would with steel wire. Number two, your travel speed is going to be faster, so you're going to have to move quickly across the material. Number three, a whip and pause type of motion is very helpful in controlling the weld profile. And then number four, which I think is the most important, is that preheat goes a long way in helping to really even out your weld profile. And so what I mean by that is a little bit of preheat before you weld. It helps prevent what typically happens with aluminum welding, which is cold stacking of the wire at the beginning of the weld, and then as you move along, the weld will flatten out. A little bit of preheat will help even out the heat of that, and then you can run a little bit less voltage and get a more even wire profile. For more information on those, stay tuned for a future video where I will be doing some welding with our spool gun and be showing you kind of how all those things come together to make a nice looking aluminum welds. And until then, thanks for watching, and thanks for watching our channel. Please like and subscribe.